Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We have some huge news coming out of Tallahassee tonight as five-star cornerback Chauncey Kennon officially makes his commitment to the Florida State Seminoles, as Mike Norvell and this new staff are starting to get some heat on the recruiting trail and starting to win the battles that I think Florida State's going to need to win more consistently going forward. And when I say that, I mean the battles for guys like Ernest Rankins, Devin Carter, Xavier Tiller, Chauncey Kennon, like those real coveted big-time blue-chip recruits. Because early on in this 2026 cycle, to be very frank, I was getting a little concerned, Florida State's bringing in some commits, but you just weren't seeing those blue-chip names come off the board in favor of Florida State enough. You were seeing a lot of three-star guys, and again, you want to be able to bring in your developmental prospects, guys maybe that you think the services are not evaluating right. But at the end of the day, you got to bring in your share of real top-end talent. And as of the last month or so, Florida State has been able to start winning those battles. The one spot you're probably looking at is the offensive line. Haven't been able to win the battles there. That's probably the one part of this class, because at the end of the day, elsewhere around it, this class is shaping up to be a pretty complete, talented class that is, I think, very capable of putting Florida State back on the right foot, and that's especially coming off the 2-10 years. So it's been impressive, I think, for the most part in terms of what Florida State's been able to do on the trail. Herb Hand in that offensive line, though, they need to get that position group going. They need to fill that talent pipeline because it's been a problem for Florida State for too long, going back to, frankly, the later days of Jimbo Fisher when his tenure started to fall off a little bit at Florida State. So that's ultimately where I think Florida State fans are going to be looking is, can this offensive line finish strong on the recruiting trail? And can they put that pipeline together to have more steady play up there going forward in the future with Herb Hand? But otherwise, looks pretty good, honestly. Before we get too deep into Chauncey Kennon and kind of what he brings and maybe where he fits with this Tony White defense, just wanted to thank all the Florida State fans for all the support through the ups, through the downs. It's been a blast covering this team. Be really interesting moving forward to see if Mike Norvell and all the changes he has made to this program, if they can get that thing back on track. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing, because we will certainly be following all that very closely and talking plenty of Florida State football going forward. So without further ado, I did want to get into Chauncey Kennon and kind of talk about the skill set he brings, because to be very honest, I don't think you see many guys who can play man coverage in the way he can in this 2026 cycle. And that really does feel like his specialty, because, again, I think you know inherently that he's got the athletic traits that you're looking for, because that's what kind of gets you those star rankings, those 4 or 5-star kind of numbers. I think what really makes him special is his ball skills, because you look when the ball's in the air, whether he's tracking it deep down the field, whether he's making plays on throws underneath, does a really good job of playing the ball, not taking penalties, and really, especially when the ball is going down the field, he just feels really comfortable with the ball in the air, running under it, tracking it, and making plays without taking penalties. And that's really, I feel like, often what separates the really good corners from like the good corners. Like, good corners typically can have the athleticism, and that's not to say like Chauncey Kennon's uniquely gifted in terms of like how little space he gives up to opposing wide receivers. But again, there's a lot of really good athletes. There's not a ton of guys who play that position with the technique that he does and the ability to play the ball in the air without getting rattled. So that to me is probably the big thing you look at with Chauncey Kennon. And why I think that's important is because when you think about what Tony White wants to do on defense, he wants to be able to be aggressive. Like the 3-3-5, the main weapon of that defense is that you can draw up really exotic blitz looks, I should say, and get really aggressive with opposing offensive lines and quarterbacks. And when he's at his best, that's the way he's calling games. But with that, you need cornerbacks and defensive backs in general who can hold up in man coverage. And when you play like a cover one look or that type of defense, maybe behind a very aggressive blitz, you can't have your cornerbacks be liable to give up big plays, take penalties, and do those, like, again, those things that kind of kill your ability to play really aggressive. So I look at the secondary that Florida State's kind of building right now. They're they're putting the pieces in place to be able to play that type of defense. And you look at the defensive line position in Hall, maybe from both the 2025 cycle and the 2026 cycle, I think that's coming together well too. So Tony White's going to have the tools to play good defense. Now, again, we'll certainly have to see if they make it happen. But I think the building blocks of what Tony White wants to do are very much in place. Now, kind of close this conversation out, I want to circle back to the offensive line talk, because I don't like to say things are like must-win battles on the recruiting trail. That just feels like hyperbolic. And again, I know sometimes like some of the analysts do like to talk like that, but you win battles, you lose battles. There's a lot of really good players out there in the country. Wilson Zierer, given kind of the thinness of this offensive line class in 2026, and probably the thinness also in the 2025 class, or maybe at least a lack of top-end talent, I think Wilson Zierer is becoming a very important battle. And I kind of like the way Florida State's trending a little bit. And obviously Auburn and Alabama are tough schools to beat out, especially with his brother being a former Auburn Tiger. But Wilson Zierer, he's going to be an important battle, not only, again, for like you want to have good players, but also for your optics. And like, can Herb Hand start creating a talent pipeline that is going to start putting guys into the league and playing good offense, or playing like a good offensive line unit should be? Because that to me is probably what's missing for this Florida State team, is there just isn't a clear pathway. Go to Florida State, play in the offensive line, or play in the NFL as an offensive lineman. And so this year, not only on the field is going to be really important, but also like, again, that type of battle, the Wilson Zierer, can you bring that guy into the program? Can he kind of play early and be effective? Because that to me is what maybe can reverse the course, if you will, on this offensive line. Like, just start showing a pathway for really talented players to play early, develop really well, go to the league. But that's going to start with this offensive line group in 2025 showing that they can be effective, showing that at least a couple of those guys can be kind of NFL ready. And to me, if they can get that going, I look elsewhere on this team and this program, you feel like you're on the right track. So this offensive line, again, it's been a problem for Florida State for a little while now. You got to fix that. You got to stem that tide. Wilson Zierer is going to be a big part of that, possibly winning that battle. But also, can you just play better on the field in 2025? That's probably even more important. So, again, we'll certainly be following that storyline, tracking that, and seeing if Florida State can put themselves in a better position via their high school recruiting up front. But elsewhere, I think you feel pretty good, frankly, if you're a Florida State fan, especially recruiting the way they are, coming off a 2-10 year. So we'll get out of there on that. I don't want to take any more of your Sunday night, but I appreciate you guys watching, and we will certainly circle back on the Florida State conversation and talk to you guys later.